I want you to picture a haunted house. Humor me, it's the spooky season. Make it as scary as you can. Come on, you can do it. Old, crumbling, dark. Got it? Okay, now imagine if that haunted house could move, that it was never in the same place twice, that it appeared and disappeared seemingly at will. Sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? But you're not bothered because no such structure exists. Right? Well, it just might. Without realizing it, what you have been envisioning is a ghost ship. Like a haunted house, it too is a shunned hulk of rotting timber with a tragic past and a forbidding atmosphere. But as stated, it has the ability to wander about as it likes, to elude the curious, and to fall upon the unsuspecting. While there are ghost ships aplenty that are said to ply the waters of the high seas, I want to talk about one that's much closer to home. It never sailed any ocean, but rather had its life and death in Lake Michigan, which for anyone unaware, dips into the northwestern corner of my state of Indiana. The Golconda was a 250-foot side-wheel palace steamer built in 1842. Essentially, it was a big swanky boat that ferried people and cargo around the Great Lake. She was considered to be one of the sturdiest, most reliable vessels of her kind, and was in service for more than a decade before the disaster. The Golconda is assumed to have gone down with all crew and passengers during a sudden and severe storm in October of 1853. The sinking of the Golconda resulted in the most open water deaths in the history of the Great Lakes. Over 300 souls were lost that night, a record that stands even now. Among the dead was the ship's owner, R.F. Marblemaw. Yes, that was his real name. Well, story goes that after the sinking of the Golconda, Marblemaw's widow reported that his collection of gemstones was not among the other heirlooms kept in their family safe. This sparked rumors that old Marblemaw must have had them on his person when the ship went under. So, there was a fortune waiting at the bottom of the lake, but no one knew exactly where the ship had gone down, and without a location, well, seeking the Golconda was a fool's errand. The search for the steamer would have to wait more than a century, when sonar and scuba technology had sufficiently advanced. Then a whole new generation began their quest for the shipwreck. Marine archaeologists and treasure hunters alike sought the long-lost vessel. Actually, an intense and often bitter race between these two camps went on for years, with neither side ever achieving victory. Both were to eventually relent and admit defeat. But then, as if waiting for all of the scientists and salvors to go home, the Golconda revealed herself to the world. The first account was made in 2011. Some anglers claimed to have seen an antiquated ship out on the lake, near their horizon. They assumed it was some kind of replica at first, but by the time the fishermen made their return, they were convinced that it was a ghost ship they had seen. Why? Well, allegedly, before they started back to the shore, the craft flickered, then faded away before their very eyes. After that, sightings became routine. Brief, but routine. A decade has passed since that first glimpse of the Golconda, and she continues to make fleeting appearances. Most are reported in the month of October, and during inclement weather for reasons that are obvious despite their phantasmal implications. There are more than a few photos of the ghost ship circulating online, and even a couple of videos. While intriguing, they are far from definitive proof, especially in this age of sophisticated digital fakery. But there are also natural deceptions to be considered, well-known optical illusions that occur in open water. One of the more famous is the Fata Morgana, a kind of mirage that makes ships on the horizon appear to float. This is more than enough for skeptics to outright dismiss the existence of this alleged ghost ship. Even still, the curious come in droves every year, descending upon the little lakefront town of Mallyn, Indiana, where sightings of the Golconda have been most frequent. And this year, my partner and I would be among them. But unlike the tourists, and even all those scientists and salvors who came before us, Joseph and I, spoiler alert, we're going to find the ghost ship. This is the Endless Elsewhere podcast, The Golconda, a Halloween special.
I know all of this already.
But the audience doesn't. We need to fill them in.
You want me to act like I don't know what we're doing so that you can explain it to me, but really the listener.
Right. With some careful editing, no one will be the wiser.
We've been in the car for like 3 hours, and you want to do this now? We're practically there, Lindsay.
Are you going to help me out or not?
Fine. So, Lindsay, what are we up to today?
You're not even trying.
Ugh, okay. How about this? Where are we going, Lindsay?
Well, Joseph, we're heading out to do a remote for Circle City Supernatural.
A remote? What's that?
It's radio lingo for when you broadcast on location. Even though I guess it doesn't totally fit in this case. We won't be broadcasting. We're going to record an investigation, which we will then air as our Halloween special. And it had better be good, too, because we're bucking a very old tradition to do this.
Wait, no open lines this year? What would Ray Cadera think?
I know. It's not my fault. Well, I guess it's partially my fault. Our fault, really, because of certain events that transpired last spring, events that were thoroughly documented in a new hit podcast. There have been fewer and fewer calls coming into my radio show. So we have to try something new, according to station management anyway.
Oh, this was their idea, of course. A dip in ratings seems like a small price to pay for having freed Circle City of its curse, but that's just me.
They were afraid of us trying to do an all-open lines show for our Halloween special, and it being nothing but dead air. As far as they're concerned, if there's no Supernatural in Circle City, there's no Circle City Supernatural.
So that's why you're being sent out of town?
More or less. The show is facing cancellation for the first time ever, so this is kind of a Hail Mary pass to get the ratings back up. Management cited the success of our little investigative podcast and said we should try doing something like that for Circle City Supernatural. And since the podcast was born out of a CCS Halloween special, well, it only made sense to give this a whirl.
Oh, and that explains why I'm here.
Well, yeah, but also because this will double as the Endless Elsewhere's Halloween special. That was the deal I struck with management. I told them I'd come out here and do this, but only if I could use it for the podcast as well.
So where are they sending us in this moderately nice rented car?
We're nearing the Indiana Dunes that lie at the shore of Lake Michigan, to a town called Mallyn. Sylvia has booked us a couple of rooms at the Firelight Inn. It sits right on the beach, apparently. Sounds lovely.
But Lindsay, what have we come here to investigate?
Oh, I'm gonna do all the exposition about the Golconda later and play it at the front.
So we can stop all this nonsense now?
Yes.
Did you get what you needed?
Not really. I'll probably just leave it all in like I normally do, and that'll be good enough.
Oh, great. So I get to sound like an idiot.
Joseph?
Yes?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Soon Joseph and I were pulling into Mallyn. There were rolling hills and jagged rock formations, uncommon features in our particularly flat slice of the Midwest. We would soon learn that this little town and the surrounding area were very much out of place in our state. The trees, however, were the same fireworks of color for which Indiana autumns are well known. The place was charming, picturesque, but for these reasons, apparently, my partner didn't trust it.
It's always a place like this, isn't it?
Huh?
A place you'd least suspect to be harboring the forces of darkness. It's probably a cult.
A cult?
Yeah, a cult. Trying to wield ancient magics or sorcery. They probably hold their rites on the shore at night. They must have conjured up some baleful entity from the deep.
What is wrong with you?
I've seen this kind of thing before. Have you ever heard of the Boonies cult? They were a blight on Circle City way back when. A cancer of evil eating away beneath the surface. This feels like that kind of thing.
Well, let's not jump to any conclusions. We're not even out of the car yet. I wasn't sure if it was the season or the scenery, but something had my partner uncharacteristically riled up. We drove through the heart of town with plans to explore it on foot after we settled into our accommodations, which were down at the lake. The lake. It hardly felt like a lake, even a great one, as it came fully into view. The shimmering expanse fled to the furthest edge of the world with nothing seen beyond. You could have told me it was the sea, and I would have been fooled. We found a place to park and stepped out into the cool fall air, made cooler by our proximity to the water. But the sun was warm, and all the sand created at least the illusion that we were somewhere balmy. The dunes heaved and tumbled along the shoreline, their grassy embankments overlooking sometimes steep, sometimes gradual slopes down to the water's edge. That too we would explore later. For now, we needed to get checked into our rooms at the Firelight Inn, which stood just down the way from where we left the car. Joseph, ever the gentleman, carried the bags. As we neared, I took the place in. The building was very old. I couldn't even guess how old, and its architecture was unlike anything I'm familiar with. It was either a patchwork of styles or wholly an original. The irregular angles of the building didn't hold my attention long, though, as the most prominent feature of the place quickly absorbed me. The inn had its own lighthouse. Now, don't picture a traditional lighthouse. This was not the towering, cylindrical spire you see on calendars. No, this was much shorter and squared, at the base anyway. The actual lantern room was, of course, rounded by necessity. Strangely, the glass of it was all dark. I thought maybe it was tinted. Joseph thought it looked painted over. Either way, it was unusual, even unnerving. It was like meeting someone totally normal looking, except that they had pitch black eyes. That one feature being more than enough to tell you something was very wrong. We slowed to a stop, independent of the other. The pair of us had both heeded the same instinctual alarm. We exchanged looks. The feelings of unease the building evoked in my partner and I were only amplified upon entering. However, the interior was instantly warmed by the appearance of a genial, inviting woman who just appeared from the door behind the front desk.
Hello. Welcome, you guys. Come in, please.
Hi there.
Hello.
Well, look at the two of you. What a striking pair you'd make. Oh, what a shame.
What? I'm sorry?
Oh, it's just that you look really good together is all. Except for that difference in height. Dancing and kissing would be dang near impossible, huh?
How do you know we're not a...
You booked 2 rooms. That's you guys, right? From the radio station. Lindsay and Joseph.
Yeah, that's us.
Well, I'm Haley Wyckham. I am the owner and operator of the Firelight Inn. Now, Miss Flores from your radio station got you guys rooms 5 and 6 upstairs if you want to follow me. Hun, do you want some help with the bags?
Oh, no, I got it. Thank you.
Of course you do, big strong man as you are. You sure about this 2-room thing, sweetheart? Some mountains are worth climbing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
All right, then. This way.
I'm curious about this place.
It's a curious old place.
How long have you been here?
Well, I took over from Mom in, I guess it was back in 96, 97. But she's been in the Wyckham family since the start. My great whoever built her. With their own hands. You know, back when people did that. Can you imagine just building your own house? But it was my granddad Levi Wyckham who put the lighthouse up. Now, before you can ask to see up there, I'm afraid it's off limits. The lighthouse hasn't been in working order for some time now. But we used to let people go up there for the view. I had to put a stop to it, though. Did you see the glass on your way in? Yeah, did that to discourage people from sneaking up there anyway.
Why is it closed off?
Oh, I had a young couple come through here a few years back. Tourists, like all the rest. They went up there and got outside the lantern room, which is already dangerous enough. I had signs up saying to stay inside, but, well, you know people. When I caught them, these dummies were hanging off the side of the railing to get selfies or whatever. I didn't mean to, but I startled them. And the girl just about fell off and got herself killed. I had to lock it up after that. It's mostly an insurance thing. Kind of year to year here, financially speaking. This old place wouldn't survive a lawsuit. Oh, it's a shame, too. In all of Melgren, there wasn't a better view of the lake. Ah, well. Some moron always has to ruin it for everyone else, huh?
Why did your grandfather add on the lighthouse? Was this area in need of one?
Oh, you're a curious type, huh? Let me guess, the pair of you are here for that silly old ship?
We are, yes. Have you ever seen the Golconda?
Honey, between you and me, it's a bunch of hooey. But it keeps the tourists coming in, so...
No offense taken.
Oh, I didn't mean you, sweetie. You're not like these other yahoos. I can tell. Anyway, come on. Your rooms are right across from one another, and I'm downstairs if you need anything.
You live on the property?
Of course. This old girl and I, well, we're rather inseparable at this point. Like it or not.
Miss Wyckham? Miss Wyckham?
Oh, sorry, got pulled away there for a second, didn't I?
Do you have any other guests staying here at the moment?
Just you guys. It gets busier around here as the month goes on, the closer we get to Halloween. You guys picked a really good time to come, actually. You beat the crowds. Starting next week, I'm all booked up through November. But for now, it's just us.
Do you mind if we put our stuff down and go? We wanted to walk around town before dark.
Of course, of course. You guys have a good time, and I'll see you back here tonight.
Joseph and I left the Firelight Inn, strolling the quarter-mile or so back up Main Street to the little town we'd passed through on our way down to the lake. What was normally a sleepy little burg was now wide awake. This was Melgren's time, the month for which they spent all year planning and preparing. They had leaned into the story of the ghost ship and cashed in as well. Every shop either had Golconda merchandise in the window, or they had themed their own goods with the vessel. The bakery, for instance, had Golconda cookies, large, ship-shaped pastries generously frosted around the edges for that ghostly effect. The cafe, meanwhile, had designed a special house blend in honor of the Golconda, the smokestack they called it. The coffee had a triple shot of espresso, and extra foam so that the frothing cup resembled the chimney of the long-lost steamer. On the marquee of Melgren's historic Turnquist Theater, we read advertisements for a Golconda costume contest, a Golconda short film festival, and a Golconda ghost story recital by local folklorist Herbert Adler. On the community board in Town Square, we saw leaflets for a Golconda pumpkin carving contest, a Golconda apple bobbing contest, a Golconda ring tossing contest, and so on. They had tailored, or even named, literally everything in town after the ghost ship. Every food, event, and activity. Uninspired? Maybe, but undeniably effective. The people came to Melgren for the Golconda, and by golly, they got the Golconda. Oh, and if there's anything you may have overlooked, someone in town will be happy to tell you all about it. Believe me.
Welcome to Melgren. Your first time joining us?
Oh, hi. Thanks. Yeah, first time.
I saw you looking at our notice board here and thought you should know that all of our local festivities culminate with a parade on Halloween night. There is a very impressive float of the ghost ship that local craftsmen spend months building. It sails along Main Street here and goes all the way down to the lake for a party. There are bonfires and food and live music. It's a lot of fun. We hope to see you there.
Thanks. Appreciate you telling us.
Of course, dear. Goodbye.
Was that an ambassador from the Board of Tourism?
I think they all are. I mean, not really, but I think they're all,
In on it? Yeah, and I totally called it. It's a cult.
It's not a cult. It's probably not a cult. True, this town had gone bananas for the ghost ship, but that didn't mean there was anything nefarious going on. They were just enthusiastic. After all, there's nothing worse than visiting a place and having your time there sullied by unfriendly locals. The people of Melgren were the stewards of their town, and they were going to make sure that all visitors had a great experience. But what kind of person came to a little out-of-the-way place like this for just the chance of spotting a ghost ship? Haley had said the town got busier as the month went on, but the tourists were already trickling in. Joseph and I had been sharing the sidewalk with them, so I took the opportunity to approach a few. Hi, can I ask you a question? I'm with a radio station in Circle City.
Go right ahead.
So, what brings you to Melgren?
I'm here to see that pirate ship.
Oh, you mean the ghost ship?
Right, yeah, but it was a pirate ship to start with, right? Had all that gold on it?
Gemstones, actually, and it was a steamship, not a pirate ship.
Nah, I'm pretty sure it was. Haven't you heard about all the pirates that used to be around here?
Yes, I haven't. Hey, big guy, are you hoping to see the ghost ship?
I like dinosaurs?
And who doesn't? Where are you from?
Ridgewood, Ireland.
Wow, that's a long way to come.
It'll be worth it if I can get some footage of the Golconda.
Footage?
For my documentary. I'm traveling all around America, visiting strange and unusual places.
Oh, interesting. We'll have to look for that when it comes out. What's the documentary called?
Finding the Paranormal Among the Gobshite Yanks.
Okay. So what is it about the ghost ship that interests you?
I think it's beautiful.
You think the design of the Golconda was beautiful?
No, I think it's beautiful that all those people died together. They all went as one. I think there's a lot of beauty in that kind of mass death.
How so?
They weren't alone in the end.
Gotcha. Even if no one said it specifically, it was very clear what had brought them to Melgren. It was October, the spooky season, when the collective interest in the paranormal is far higher than usual. That's what lured the tourists to Melgren. No one was guaranteed a sighting of the ghost ship, of course, but that's what made it an adventure. Just the possibility of seeing something otherworldly was more than enough for these people. So we'd heard from some visitors, but we also wanted to get the perspective of someone who lived here year-round. Of all the storefronts lining Main Street, one shop in particular jumped out at us. Well, at Joseph anyway. It was called the Taberna Obscura, and if the Latin wasn't enough, the sign was also wood-carved, hand-painted, and suspended on chains over the front door. Definitely my partner's kind of place. I'd expected to step into a novelty shop, or even some neo-apothecary, but it was simply an antique store. At least, primarily so. While Joseph wandered off to have a look around, I struck up a conversation with the shopkeeper, who I learned was also the owner of the establishment. Leonard Dyer was a distinguished-looking gentleman, graying, spectacled, and measured in his step. However, our host was energetic in his personality and amiable in his tone. After just a moment of conversation, it became clear that Leonard Dyer was both highly intelligent and deeply compelling. So I'm with a radio station based in Circle City, and I'm here in Melgren doing a piece on the Golconda. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about it?
Please, go right ahead.
Great. Thanks. So, right off the bat, I noticed that you don't have any ghost ship merchandise. In all the other shop windows, we've seen t-shirts, mugs...
Bumper stickers that say my other car is a ghost ship. Yeah, that's not really my thing. When people come into a little town like this, they don't always want the mass market wares. They want an actual piece of the history that brought them to Melgren. And that's what I sell here. History.
Is this a stereo opticon?
It certainly is.
Does it function?
Actually, it does. I have a workshop in the back. I restore a lot of this stuff as best I can. It's a passion of mine.
What is a stereo...
Opticon. Essentially, it's a slide projector. They were used in magic lantern shows once upon a time.
Yes, very good. Not many people still know what those things are. I'm impressed.
He loves old stuff like this.
Oh, well, then he might enjoy the Xerostopes. Next aisle over, young man.
Whoa! These are great.
Well, that should keep him busy for a moment. You were saying, dear?
We've spoken with some tourists already, but I'm wondering just how seriously the actual residents of Melgren take the ghost ship.
Young lady, have you seen the town? They take it very seriously.
Of course, but I mean, do they actually believe that there is a ghost ship out on the lake? We've talked to another local today who's not convinced. I'm just wondering if she's in the minority or not.
You mean Haley Wyckham? You two must be staying down at the Firelight.
We are. Do you know Haley?
A town like this? Everyone knows everyone.
Sure. So, she thinks it's, in her own words, a bunch of hooey. Do you think the Golconda is hooey, Mr. Dyer?
Well, that's a big question. Bigger than it may seem. You see, there are actually two types of ghost ships, and people often interchange the terms. The first type is an actual vessel that's been abandoned by a crew and left adrift in the open water. That's the kind of ghost ship we know to exist. But then there is the other kind, the spectral kind, the actual ghost of a ship, a la the Flying Dutchman, cursed to wander among the waves for eternity and all that.
And that's the kind of ghost ship people have seen here?
It would have to be. A physical Golconda couldn't still be on the water, not almost 170 years later. But then...
Yes?
Well, it's just that... And this has been gnawing at me for a long time now. If the physical ship did go down in that storm, why was she never found? We had archaeologists and salvagers combing the lake for years. Years! They camped out here in Melgren while they worked, and I got chummy with some of them on both sides, and they were all absolutely bewildered. They couldn't find such a large ship. Strangers still no piece of her ever washed ashore as far as we know. Not even a body.
They never I know everyone was assumed dead, but they never found anyone?
Not a single soul.
What does that mean?
It means that wherever the Golconda is, all of her crew and passengers are still with her.
Wherever she is. The ship has to be in the lake somewhere, right? There's literally nowhere else it could be.
The lake is big. No one is denying that. But it's not an ocean. So why couldn't those ship hunters ever find her? It's a mystery, and it drove all of them a little crazy. I think that's why they eventually gave up. They went home and never came back. And that just about killed this little town.
How so?
We didn't quite realize how much we'd come to depend on all those scientists and salvers. Coming here every year, Melbourne's population rose by 100 people or more from the start of spring to the end of summer. Well, when the weather's good to be on the water. I mean, all of those people had to stay somewhere and had to eat somewhere. Oh, they were a boon to our little burg, and a much-needed one, too, especially after they closed the steel plant back in...
Well, then I guess it's good you have all these tourists now. Curious that the ghost ship didn't start appearing until after the searchers left. Is that simply a coincidence?
Are you wondering if it's a hoax?
I am.
The timing is suspicious, to be honest. It has made me wonder about the truth of it all. And I have to admit, it could very well be one big prank. But there might just be another explanation. Maybe. And this is just one man thinking out loud here. Maybe it was all those seekers of the Golconda that are to blame for her resurrection.
Come again?
Now think about it. All the years they spent sailing back and forth across the lake, dragging their instruments through the water, pulsing the lake bed with their sonar, I have to wonder if they didn't, wake her up.
Have you ever seen the ghost ship, Mr. Dyer?
I have never seen the Golconda, no. But I do believe in the Golconda. Real or not, she saved this town.
I wrapped up my interview with Mr. Dyer, then reclaimed my partner, all but dragging him away from the antiquity. On the sidewalk again, we could see that things were winding down on Main Street. It was early evening now, and most of the shops would be closing up soon, probably as a coordinated strategy to funnel the crowds into the overpriced restaurants for dinner. After some back and forth about what sounded good, Joseph and I settled on the lakefront grill. I had the coho salmon, and my partner, the rainbow trout. But Lindsay, wasn't there a special Golconda-themed meal available? Yes, there was. The hook, line, and steamer, a poached walleye with a lemon slice, toothpicked to the flank of the fish to resemble the Golconda's side wheel. Both Joseph and I found it to be a bit much. We finished our dinner, then ambled back to the lake. It was a lovely evening, so lovely that Joseph and I did not return to the inn, but rather went down to the water's edge. The sun was setting now, and it was magnificent. I'll spare you the bad poetry of a description, but what I will say is that I found a much better reason for coming to the shores of Mallyn than some ghost ship. Afterward, when it was getting dark, and cold beyond my liking, we headed back to the firelight and settled in for the night. I awoke around 3 a.m. to a weird sound outside my door. I sat up and looked around, having momentarily forgotten where I was. You know how it is, waking up in a strange place, and I thought I'd simply dreamed the sound until it came again. What else was I to do but grab the recorder? It's the middle of the night and I hear something. Joseph, is that you? I'm gonna have a look. I can't see anything, but I hear breathing. I'm gonna stick the recorder out the door and see if it picks up anything. I don't really want to go out there myself. I played this recording for Joseph the next morning. After we'd left the inn, of course.
Well, it's not snoring. It's far too rapid for that.
But it's Haley, right?
It doesn't really sound like her. Or any person.
It's gotta be. She's the only other one at the firelight. Wait. Any person? You think it could be what? You think the place is haunted now?
I would not be surprised. There is definitely something up in this town. Feels like it could be a spiritual disturbance. Demon kind take the forms of familiar things to deceive us. Typically, they manifest in the guise of a deceased person, but why not a ship? It could be a whole cluster of them working together to form the massive apparition that's been seen on the water.
Okay, slow down. We don't even know if this thing is real yet. Until we've actually seen something, we should probably just assume it's a hoax.
I guess. So, what's on the agenda for today?
Well, we've already spoken with plenty of people, collected lots of opinions, but now we need to find some hard facts.
Ooh, yeah. In-depth research. Now you're speaking my language. We'll begin at the local library.
Easy there, nerd.
But first things first. Coffee.
We made the short walk back into town and stopped in at the cafe. When the barista asked us what we wanted, Joseph shrugged and ordered a couple of smokestacks, the house special. Hackneyed theme aside, the blend was good. Good enough that Joseph and I both finished our coffees by the time we reached the local library a few more blocks inland. Or maybe we just reached the place very quickly. Those 3 shots of espresso certainly put a pep in our step. This was the quieter part of town. Not only was it removed from the bustle of Main Street, it was further from the clamorous lapping of Lake Michigan. For that reason, it was also warmer, more comfortable. And that's probably why there were more houses to be seen, as the commercial area faded into the residential. But so too was this section of town less maintained. Neglected, if I'm being honest. The lake, or its specter really, was the cash cow. The money was made at the water's edge and was spent there as well. But as you went further inland, to the outskirts of town, you began to see what Melgren used to look like before the Golconda boom. The buildings here had not been rescued by gentrification. They sagged and leaned with their age. The trees, beautiful as they were, grew as they liked, hanging much too low over the sidewalks and roadway. The concrete of both had been long splintered by the roots, whose growth from beneath went equally unchecked. It made our going increasingly treacherous, and by the end, our walk was more of a hike. When we eventually came upon the library, we did not immediately recognize it as such. It looked like an old church. It was an old church. According to a plaque beside the front door, the building had been donated to Melgren's municipality, which had turned it into a library decades earlier. And that seemed to be the last they'd done to the place. Like everything else around it, the church was dilapidated and dank. But my partner didn't seem to mind. It had that same musty smell of Joseph's own library at the bank. He smiled, feeling right at home as we entered. We approached the circulation desk and asked the librarian, a crotchety crone, where we could find local history. With a dispassionate grunt, she directed us to the basement. Joseph and I descended the steps, but paused at the bottom. We were awaited by uninterrupted darkness. Joseph felt along the wall until he found a switch, then flicked the toggle. Nothing. You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, come on, it's an adventure.
I got my phone out and turned on the flashlight feature. The place looked like a crypt that hadn't been opened in millennia. Joseph told me to stay where I was, then alone went forward. I looked on as he slashed through sheets of cobwebs on his way to the nearest wall. There, he jerked aside a short curtain that hung in front of a thin window up near the ceiling. The daylight that poured into the basement only illuminated the dust my partner had stirred up with his entrance. Not until it began to settle could we take in our surroundings. Well, this place is weird.
Not the weirdest church basement that we've ever been in.
True. Is this really necessary? Can't we just look this stuff up online?
None of this has been digitized, I'm sure of it. I don't even see microfiche anywhere.
So we, what, go through it by hand? Joseph rolled up his sleeves and smiled. Whatever materials we had expected to find, there were only old newspapers. A lot of old newspapers. Mercifully, they were in some kind of order, so once we found the era of the Golconda, Joseph and I began picking through the brittle stacks. We quickly covered the one available table, then we sat ourselves on either side of it, poring over the ancient broadsheets. Do we expect to learn something here that we don't already know?
We are collating data, from which we will construct a timeline of events, then we will seek to corroborate those events with multiple sources.
You're definitely in your element.
Oh, this used to be my job. All of those stories that I used to publish started with this kind of work.
Oh, this would be a good time to plug the anthology.
Sure, go ahead.
For returning listeners, you'll recall Joseph saying at the end of Season 1 that he was going to assemble some of the stories he'd collected in the years before we met and put them out in book form, as he did with the Pendergast manuscripts. Well, he's done just that. The Endless Elsewhere Volume 1 is available now wherever you get your books, but if you order it from our website, endlesselsewhere.com, yours will be autographed. So, if you like our show and want to delve deeper into the lore of it, get your copy today.
Okay, enough with the commercial. I have something here.
What do you got?
Leonard Dyer was correct. They never found a single body.
That's really strange, right? Don't dead bodies float?
As a corpse decays, gases build up internally, blowing it up like a balloon, which brings the body back to the surface. However, if the water is very cold, that can slow decomposition.
Lake Michigan is certainly cold. Does that explain why?
Maybe, but it doesn't explain why there was never any flotsam.
Please, no nautical terms.
Sorry, it's wreckage. No chunk of the ship ever washed up. The Golconda was one of the early steamships and therefore made of wood. Even if she didn't break up as she sank, something should have come loose eventually and made its way to shore. This article I'm reading is from the Melbourne Telegraph, April 1854, 6 months after the Golconda went under. You would think they would have found something or someone by then.
So maybe Leonard Dyer is also right about the other thing he said? Wherever the ship is, she still has all of her crew and passengers. What? What is it?
The Golconda
Yes?
must have passed through an interdimensional rift.
Come again?
It's the only thing that makes sense, why there was no trace of it. The ship had to have gone somewhere, yes? Well, if it's not at the bottom of Lake Michigan, then it must be... it's still here. We just can't see it.
Okay.
That may also explain the nature of the sightings. Why it's there 1 minute and gone the next. The Golconda is passing back and forth between two dimensions.
Don't you think that's a little far-fetched?
After what you and I experienced last spring, well, my only concern these days is not thinking big enough.
I suppose, but we haven't even seen this thing yet, so maybe we should...
Go out on the lake and look for it?
I was going to say temper our expectations and stay level-headed, but I guess that could be good. For the show, anyway. Just keep in mind, this is more about the journey, the search, rather than actually finding anything.
That's loser talk. We are going to find the Golconda.
And find her we did. Joseph and I left the library and headed back into town. Back to the cafe, where we stopped for a soup and sandwich lunch. And more coffee, obviously. Afterward, we continued down to the lake and along the shore to the nearest dock. It was small, having less than a dozen sport and fishing crafts moored along it. Their owners were busied getting the boats tied down and covered over. We had noticed the gathering clouds out on the lake as we came back into town, but they weren't as dense or as dark as they were now. A storm was brewing.
No one's gonna take us out on the lake. We'll have to try again tomorrow.
Hang on, what about that guy? At the edge of the dock, we saw a man sitting behind a card table. Laid out across it were rows of binoculars.
Binoculars? Get your binoculars here. Only $20 a pair. See the Golconda while you can.
Hello, I'm Lindsay. This is my partner, Joseph.
Hey, I'm Dylan. Can I interest you guys in a pair of these fine binoculars?
No, Dylan, we were actually...
We're wanting to see the Golconda. Up close. That skiff there. That yours?
It is. Can't go out on the water, though. Storm's coming in.
And that's when the ghost ship likes to appear, huh? During storms?
The same thing that took her under brings her back. That's why you guys need a pair of these binoculars, so you can spot the ship safely from the shore. This is the only place you can see her from.
Is that right? We'd heard this was the best spot to see the ghost ship, but not that it was the only spot. Seems odd that a supernatural event would have such limitations. So why is it only visible from Melgren's shore?
She was on her way here when she sunk. That's the story, anyway. What you're seeing is the Golconda trying to make port, but she vanishes before she can. She's caught in like a
time loop. Huh. A time loop.
Settle down. So, you've seen the ghost ship, Dylan?
Oh yeah, a ton of times. But nobody's seen her this year. Not yet. Today feels like the day. Especially if the storm makes it across the lake. And I'm pretty sure it will.
I looked out over the water to the swelling clouds. They already looked closer than they had been.
So do you guys want some binoculars or not?
What we want is to quietly charter your skiff.
Sorry, buddy. Too dicey.
What if we bought a pair of binoculars?
What if you bought 6 pairs?
6 pairs? What am I going to do with 6 pairs of binoculars?
Just buy them.
That's $120. I don't even know if I have that much cash on me.
Oh, look. Everyone else is leaving the dock before the storm comes over. It'd be so easy to slip away right now.
Fine. Here, take it.
Okay, then. Climb aboard.
I took an unused sandwich bag from my pocket and slipped the recorder inside. Cheap waterproofing. Then I asked about life jackets, but Dylan didn't have any. So, ignoring the obvious danger, the 3 of us loaded into the skiff. Joseph and I sat on a low bench in the middle as Dylan moved to the back, to the outboard motor. He threw a glance around the dock to the retreating figures of the other boaters. Dylan took a deep breath, then ripped the engine to life. As soon as he did, Dylan sped away before anyone could raise an objection. He appeared to relax after that. His face, anyway. But I knew better. Dylan had one hand on the tiller, one on his knee. Our skipper gripped both nervously as he steered us toward the churning clouds. The plan was not to drive us into the storm, of course, but to get a closer look than the shore could afford, even with one of the 6 new pairs of binoculars. If we did witness something, this would lessen the chances of it being some kind of open water mirage. But we also had to be mindful of the storm's march across the lake. While we were approaching it, it was approaching us. With a few miles still safely between the storm and the skiff, Dylan cut the engine and let us drift.
There. Look while you can. We can't stay here long.
I was suddenly very uncomfortable. We were so far from the shore now, sitting in a little boat that was rocking on increasingly turbulent waters, watching a hulking mass of black clouds fill up the sky. I glanced to Joseph. He looked worse than I felt. Hey, you okay? Is it the storm?
It's more the lake. Just not a water person. Big bodies of it like this, it's eerie.
Actually, it's Michigan. Erie is that direction.
Oh, stop. Do you always have to be so superior?
Well, here on this lake, we don't make such lame jokes. Maybe Ontario. Sorry, thought I could keep that going. Whoa, look, there she is.
And there she undeniably was. Through the roiling clouds of the storm, the vague, shadowy form of the old steamer materialized. This was the ghost ship. But which kind was she? Even from this closer perspective out on the water, it was impossible to distinguish the vessel as either physical or spectral. My impulse was to touch it in some way, but for that we'd have to make a suicide run into the storm, so I tried for the next best thing. I wanted to hit it with something. I had to know if what I was seeing was really there, or if this was some kind of mirage or hallucination or whatever. Dylan, do you have a flare gun on board?
I've never seen it this close before.
It's incredible.
Dylan!
Huh? What?
A flare gun. Do you have one?
Lindsay, what's wrong?
We're fine. We don't need to call for help. If you're scared, we can...
Flare gun. Yes or no?
There's a smoke signal in the tackle box under the bench by your feet.
Lindsay, what are you doing?
That orange stick. That's it.
How does it work?
If you use that, the whole shore is going to think we're sinking out here.
How does it work?
I knew coming out here was a mistake. You guys are going to get me in trouble.
Dylan!
Unscrew the cap on the end. No, the other end. Under the handle. Okay, now pull that string.
Get us closer.
Toward the storm? Toward the... you know.
Yes.
Lindsay!
Trust me.
Do what she says, Dylan.
You owe me more money, dude.
Wait.
What?
Joseph, look. Above us. Do you see that?
Yes. What is that?
Change of plan. Dylan, take us perpendicular to the storm front.
What?
That way. Go that way.
Dylan turned sharply left so that we were now skimming alongside the wall of nearing clouds. I then dove into the bow of the skiff. Orange plumes were still erupting from the smoke signal, which I then held aloft while trying to stand in the speeding boat. I faltered and just about went over the side, but Joseph grabbed me. On his knees, he wrapped both his arms around my legs, anchoring me steadfast in place. You see that, right?
I see it.
I had wanted a flare gun to shoot at the Golconda, something glowing that would pierce the storm and clearly strike or pass through the vessel, answering once and for all which kind of ghost ship she really was. However, having only a smoke signal available to me, my plan then became to get close enough to throw it at the ghost ship, but not to strike it. No, I hoped, that if the Golconda did have some kind of physicality, the orange smoke would outline her, help differentiate her among those darkened clouds. But the smoke had an unforeseen effect and revealed something otherwise invisible to us. Above the skiff, projected across the lake, was a beam. A beam of light was suspended overhead, linking the ghost ship to the shore. Can you see where it's coming from?
Well, if only I had a pair of binoculars.
Joseph, with an arm still around me, reached for one of the 6 pairs of binoculars he now owned and brought the lenses to his eyes. He focused on the shoreline and scanned it. Well, can you see where it's...
Oh yeah, I know exactly where it's coming from. Dylan, take us back.
Oh, gladly.
I tossed the smoke signal into the water and sat back down in the boat as Dylan veered sharply away and aimed us toward the dock. Joseph and I huddled in the bow, looking back to the storm, to the Golconda, and like the steamer had before the eyes of countless witnesses before us, she vanished.
Oh, man. I told you this would happen.
What? What is it?
Look.
As we came alongside the dock to disembark, emergency services were pulling up to the lake. The smoke signal had been seen and reported. I played the dumb tourist. I told them I'd panicked out on the water and apologized profusely, doing my best to get Joseph and I on our way. But it was not to be. The pair of us were delayed. We weren't arrested, thankfully, but we were scolded. Why were you out on the lake in a storm? Don't you know how dangerous that is? Did you stop to think about what you were doing? Do you realize how serious it is to send a distress signal on the water when there's nothing actually wrong? And on it went. I honestly think the lecture would have persisted indefinitely if the storm hadn't eventually reached the shore. No one wanted to be standing around in the rain, so they gave us some stern warnings and quickly dispersed. Dylan, who I assumed to be furious with Joseph and I for getting him into this mess, actually smiled and even laughed. He waved goodbye before leaving for home. Then, finally, Joseph and I could go. It wasn't so much the storm at our heels, but rather the mystery at hand that sent us careening back to the inn. That's right. The beam of light we saw connecting the Golconda to the shore, it was coming from the firelight. Swift as we were, the storm had overtaken us by the time we got back, so we burst through the front door sopping wet. We stumbled to the front desk, where there was no sign of Haley. Once we caught our breath, we called for her.
Miss Wyckham. Haley.
Haley, are you here?
I don't think she is.
I wonder where she...
The lighthouse.
You think she's up there? You think she's the one who...
Only one way to find out.
How do we...
There.
Behind the front desk was a door. If you recall, Haley was just stepping out from there when we first arrived yesterday. I'd assumed it was just the manager's office. However, Joseph explained that when Haley had been telling us about the lighthouse, he noticed that she'd nod backward as she did so, unconsciously indicating this door. He went around the desk and tried the knob, expecting it to be locked, and was surprised to find it not. Behind the door was a short hallway with a spiral staircase at the end. This was the way to the lighthouse. We made short work of the climb and were soon inside the lantern room. Despite its name, darkness prevailed. Remember, all the glass had been covered over, and we soon learned why. I got my phone in hand and again turned on the flashlight feature. Well, no Haley. Do you think she ran off?
Maybe.
What is it?
This. The beacon. It's not right.
You're telling me. What the heck is this?
I've seen something like it very recently, and so have you.
What? Where?
The Taverna Obscura.
Leonard Dyer's shop. So this is like one of those things you two were talking about?
It's a stereopticon, but I've never seen one so... massive.
Did you say these things were like a slide projector?
That hardly seems an adequate description for something like this, but yeah, basically. Nothing like this was ever manufactured. He must have made it himself. Look, he's got it built right into the... He harnessed the power of the lighthouse. He would have needed that much energy to cast the image of a ship across the lake. Here in the glass, there's an aperture for the beam. He uses the clouds as his screen, his backdrop. That's why the ghost ship only appears in storms.
And it fits into the narrative of the Golconda sinking in one.
Look, this is the slide. The image is incomplete, but purposefully so to give it that indistinct, ghostly effect. This is amazing.
Try to sound less impressed with the villain, please.
Sorry, it's
amazing. Yeah, I got that. It's also fraud.
So it was a hoax. This whole thing was just a magic lantern show. Real or not, the Golconda saved this town. That's what he said, remember? He meant himself. Leonard Dyer saved this town.
So where is he? Leonard would have been up here running this thing, right?
The police did hold us up for a while. He must have slipped away in the interim.
But where is Haley? She's got to be in on it. That's why she made up that story about the tourist almost getting killed up here. To close off the lighthouse. To keep this secret.
They might be together.
His shop. Let's try there.
Yeah, let's go.
We left the Firelight Inn for the Taberna Obscura, driving instead of running, as the storm had now fully engulfed Melgren. As a result, the streets were deserted, but so too was Leonard Dyer's shop. The place was locked up tight, the lights off. We stood at the front windows, peering inside, looking for any sign of him or Haley, but there was none. Drat.
Well, now what?
We can't stay out in this. Back to the inn, I guess. We made a cautious return as the rain was now torrential and therefore dangerous. We parked and ran to the front entrance, bursting in yet again, far wetter than before. But this time, Haley was behind the front desk. Like yesterday, she was just closing that door to the lighthouse and turned to face us, smiling. Joseph and I were thunderstruck. We had assumed she and her co-conspirator had realized the jig was up and fled town, but it was my partner and I who were packed and ready to go. Our bags lay neatly stacked, awaiting us on the carpet.
I hope you had a lovely stay at the Firelight Inn and will consider recommending us to your friends.
She's crazy.
You're throwing us out because we learned the truth?
It's checkout time if you just signed the book here.
Haley, we know about the Golconda. We've been in the lighthouse.
Yes, I know. I heard you earlier. I was busy upstairs packing your bags. Don't worry, I was sure to get all of your belongings.
Where is Leonard? We know he's a part of this.
Oh, Leo's going to lay low for a bit. He knew it was all over, that you'd figured him out.
How did he know? How did he know that we figured him out?
The smoke. He saw it from the lighthouse. Saw how it illuminated the beam of his gizmo. Leo. Sweet Leo. He came down from the lighthouse in tears. Actual tears! Said it was curtains for Melgren. I tried to console him, the poor thing. Told him it didn't really matter if a couple of out-of-towners learned his trick or not. But he wouldn't hear it. He felt foolish, I suppose. He turned it on for the pair of you. He knew you guys were from a radio station in Circle City. He wanted you to see the Golconda and go back with a story to put on the air. He thought it would bring even more people to Melgren. But it backfired. It wasn't enough that you'd figured out his little ruse. Leo knew you'd then tell the world about it. Then no one would come here ever again. He was ashamed.
Of his fraud?
Of his failure. To the town.
Well, he was right. All of this will be going into my show. Why did you participate in this con, Haley? I'm recording. Give us your perspective. It may help the listeners understand why you did this. Was it to save Melgren? To keep the cash machine going?
I did not share Leo's motivation, no.
So what was it? Why did you let him use your lighthouse for this farce?
Is that what you really want to know? If so, I have to first tell you what happened to the Golconda. And you may not want to hear it.
Yes, tell us.
What happened, Haley? Where is the ship?
Well, sweethearts, you're standing in it.
I'm sorry?
This, all this around you, this is the Golconda.
I don't understand.
The steamer did, in fact, find herself in a terrible storm that night all those many, many years ago. But someone lit a signal fire on the shore to guide her to port. It was a trick, however. A false beacon that lured the ship onto the rocks. The Golconda didn't splinter as expected. No, she was too strong for that, too sturdy. But she did capsize, then rolled completely over, crushing or drowning most every soul aboard. And even those who managed to survive the wreck did not do so for long. As they clambered onto the shore, they were promptly cut down by mooncussers. Are you familiar with that word, mooncusser?
Land pirates, gangs of thieves. They would build signal fires on the shore, causing ships to run aground so that the vessels may then be plundered. They're called mooncussers because they curse the moon. If it's out, then there's greater visibility at night, and their little trick doesn't work.
So smart. Yes, very good. Except in this case, the mooncussers were not a gang. They were a family. But they had grown weary of the roaming outlaw life and wanted to put down roots. The family had taken a liking to this region, what was then still a wild area of the lakeshore. So they claimed it. You could do that back then. Well, try to anyway, with varying degrees of success. Pretty much anyone could just come along and claim it too. That is, unless you built a house upon the land, then you were more likely to be recognized as the rightful owner. So that's what this family of mooncussers did. They built a home for themselves. But where did they get all the lumber? Why, they had a whole mess of it right there on the shore. So they got to work, tirelessly putting up their house. They even labored through the winter to finish by spring when a wider search for the missing steamer would be conducted. Sure, others had come looking initially, but the Golconda had flipped over among the rocks. With some disguising, she was made to look like just another feature of the shoreline. This kept her hidden while the family harvested every last plank from the ship.
The family was the Wickhams. Your family. You said this place had been in your line since the beginning. And the bodies? There were over 300 people on that ship, Haley.
A secret is only a secret if someone knows. Keep a secret well enough and it will eventually pass away with the final holder of it. Or so we'd like to think. Really, a secret never goes away. It just waits, down in the dark, to be discovered again. It was my granddad, Levi, who unearthed the mooncusser's secret. By the time he'd inherited this place, it needed a lot of work. A handyman by trade, Granddad Levi planned to conduct a total renovation, all by himself. He wasn't going to let our ancestral home crumble into the lake, so he got to work, tearing up floors and pulling down walls
And that's when he started to find the bodies. The mooncussers built this house out of the Golconda and everyone aboard, all of it to hide their crimes. This place isn't just a shipwreck, it's a tomb.
Lindsay, do you smell that?
Among the bones, Granddad found the captain's log. Apparently someone had found the time to record what had happened to the steamer, how she'd been deceived. Granddad also found old Marble Maw's gemstones. You see, the mooncussers are smart enough to keep them hidden. They knew that if they'd try to sell them, the gemstones would be recognized and they'd be found out. But by the time they fell to my granddad, generations later, well, he was able to hawk them in some black market sale. He got only half of what they were worth because of it, but it was still quite a bit, enough to finish renovations and even make some additions to the place.
Like the lighthouse. Why did he do that?
Guilt, naturally. Sins of the father and all that. It runs deep in our family. The mooncussers had lured that ship onto the rocks with a false signal, so Granddad built a real one to protect ships. That's also when he turned the Wickham's family home into an inn. He wanted to care for people. His way of atoning.
And he couldn't help but calling this place the Firelight.
It's so we'd never forget. You see, from then on, when the place was handed off to the next in line, the secret was as well. Granddad gave it to Mom, and Mom to me. But the problem is, I'm the last of the Wickhams. I have no one to pass it on to. I cannot unburden myself of this place. So many dead, and they're still here.
Your grandfather just left the bones? He kept them hidden?
He didn't have to. They were so old, they turned to dust in his hands. All dust. It's been seeping through the cracks of this old place. I've been breathing them in for years. They're not in the walls. They're in me.
Lindsay, we need to leave. She set a fire somewhere.
I smell it now. Haley, come on. We need to get out of here.
You go. I'm gonna stay.
You're not well, Haley. Please come with us. It's not your fault. What your family did all those years ago, what your grandfather did, it's not your fault.
Sure it is. It's in my blood. I'm a moon cusser.
No, you're not. You're not a...
She's absolutely right. She is a moon cusser, basically. Her lighthouse. It's a false beacon that draws people to this shore. They plunder tourists.
I don't care about tourism or money. This place deserves to go under. Go under.
Then what was it, Haley? Why did you let Leo put his machine in the lighthouse? Why did you go along with his plan?
My greatest fear, which has been the greatest fear of all Wickhams, is for our family secret to be learned. Leo convinced me that if I let him use the lighthouse, it would keep people looking to the lake for the Golconda, instead of here, where it stood for ages.
The smoke is getting thicker. Come on, we have to go.
Haley, come with us.
It was a fire that brought the Golconda to shore. It will be a fire that sends her back out to the water where she belongs. Where I belong.
The Firelight Inn became its namesake. Haley had wanted the place reduced to ash, and for that ash to blow into the lake, but it wasn't quite so poetic of an ending. Emergency services were slow in their response because of an earlier false alarm involving a couple of out-of-towners, but the heavy rain helped keep the blaze in check until they arrived to finish it off. However, in the lantern room, where the fire had originated, enough time had elapsed for the contents to be incinerated. All evidence of Leonard Dyer's device had been erased before the fire made its way down the lighthouse and through the rest of the building. Haley was escorted by ambulance to the nearest hospital for psychological evaluation. Yes, that's right. Joseph dragged her kicking and screaming from the inn as I grabbed our bags. She'd been found sitting in the rain, muttering and crying when the authorities arrived. Fortunately for Joseph and I, she readily admitted to setting the fire herself. Even still, the police requested that we come with them to the station to give statements on the matter. First we cried wolf on the lake, and now our inn was on fire. I can hardly blame the authorities for wanting to check us out. They separated Joseph and I for questioning to see if our stories would align, which of course they did. We told them everything we'd discovered. They were some combination of bemused and disinterested. Eventually, when they ran out of questions and our background checks came back clean, we were free to go. Before we were out the door, however, I asked what action would be taken against either Haley or Leonard. They didn't have an answer, at least not one they were willing to share with some busybody from the city. So that was it. The ghost ship was a hoax. According to the eyewitness testimony of a couple of podcasters anyway, whose podcast is largely regarded as fictitious. While the Golconda may not be making any further appearances, people will still flock to the shores of Lake Michigan looking for her. Melgren's cash cow is alive and well. Having had our bags packed for us, and our accommodations set ablaze, Joseph and I took it as a sign to leave Mallyn. We drove home that night.
So, it was just people. It wasn't sorcery. It wasn't a parallel dimension. It wasn't a time loop. Time loop, what was I thinking?
Joseph?
And the Firelight Inn / the Golconda wasn't even haunted. Haley was driven mad by ancestral guilt.
Well, if any of what she said was true, there's probably some mental illness that runs in the Wyckham family. So...
Yeah, I guess.
What's eating at you?
There was nothing supernatural at play. It was just people.
What? You don't like a Scooby-Doo ending?
I don't like how I completely overlooked the truth. I was so sure that it was something otherworldly.
Well, there's no point in beating yourself up over it.
I spent my life collecting unbelievable stories, being the only person who ever believed that they were true. Then, having all of it confirmed as real last spring, it distorted my perception, gave me confirmation bias. I ignored vital clues because they didn't fit my assumptions, and it was all right in front of me.
Like what?
Haley always referred to the inn as she or her. No one genders a building, but they do gender ships.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't catch that at all. That brain of yours.
Didn't help us at all. My intellect failed us. It was your intuition that got us to the truth. You knew better from the start. While I was insisting that it was all supernatural, you knew that it was...
Just people.
Yeah. People.
People are what really scare me anyway.
Yeah. Let's get back to Circle City where it's all monsters and aliens. I'm sorry, Lindsay. I won't let this happen again.
Hey, it's okay. We keep an eye on each other's blind spots. That's why we're good together. We're a good team.
We are. Oh, and for the record, we could make it work.
Make what work?
Just what Haley was saying about our difference in size, not being able to, you know.
What? Dance?
Yeah, that. I think we'd figure it out.
What about that other thing she mentioned?
I think we'd figure that one out too.
Do good. Fight evil. Repeat. I'm Lindsay Mallyn, and this is the Endless Elsewhere podcast.